Okay, guys, today I'm going to go biblical on you, so I apologize if I offend anybody, but too bad because there's a very important lesson here. And I'm going to read from Acts 2. And the reason that I'm doing this is in the last 24 hours, this question came up 3 different times about, do I send my physicians the same thing that I send patients? And the answer is no. And here's why. So this is from Acts 2, and it's after Jesus had died, and Peter and the apostles are attracting other believers. So Acts 2, verse 5, now they were staying in Jerusalem, God-fearing Jews from every nation under heaven. When they heard this sound, a crowd came together in bewilderment, because each one heard them speaking in his own language. Utterly amazed, they asked, "Are not all these men who are speaking Galileans? Then how is it that each of us hears them in our own native language?" And then it goes through and lists a whole bunch of different languages from Egyptian, Parthians, Mesopotamia, Judea, Asia, Libya near Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, and Arabs as well. We hear them declaring the wonders of God in our own tongues. Amazed and perplexed, they asked one another, "What does this mean?" So what's the whole big message here? The message is that you have different target markets or publics that you're communicating with. So a target market is a group of people that you want to attract or you want to get a certain response out of. So if you're talking to physicians, that is different than talking with patients. And it is different than talking with the general public. Also, if you just look at the target market of physicians, it's you can talk with podiatrists that are going to have a certain viewpoint and perspective and reality and language, and that is a little bit different than the family physician, and that is a little bit different than the orthopedist, and that is a little bit different, and how they speak it is a little bit different than the neurologist or the neurosurgeon or the OBGYN or the urologist or the ear, nose, and throat doctor. So there's always a little intricacy in language. Now, if I'm an alien or a foreign person to your land or your world, and I can pick up on the little colloquialisms that you have, or your language, or how you speak, or your perspective, you're going to look at me a whole lot different. And the big message is if you want to attract people, you should speak the language that they speak. You should understand their perspective. You should understand their culture, their how they interact, their cadence as well. As private practice owners, we all share a certain language. And I can tell you very quickly, the language of private practice owners is a lot different than PTs working in a POPs practice. May not be significantly different, but it's significant enough that we have different realities on certain topics. Or PTs working in a hospital, or PTs doing wound care, or PTs working in a neurology type setting. I'm going to give you a pretty controversial example of this. And it's so many times I hit this in an interview, and again, if it's controversial, I apologize if you're offended, but there's a deeper principle underneath. So when we're interviewing a therapist, especially if it's an established therapist who's been out for 10 or more years, many times when my experience hasn't been the best, because they're very demanding coming in about how many patients they see, and they have the best system and all this other stuff. And many times they have multiple certifications. So, usually a little more in-depth than a CSCS. Not that there's anything wrong with that, and I did that as well when I first came out of school. But many times it's like an OCS. And what they'll say to me is, I have this OCS, therefore I should make more money. Well, who's an OCS for? What language? Who knows what an OCS is other than other PTs? I haven't met somebody yet. And I had one very dramatic therapist come in during an interview and really made this point that you are going to hire me and you're going to pay me $8,000 a year more because I have an OCS. I don't know who you're talking with, but I am not. And I said, well, here's my challenge to you. I want you to go out into the general public and find one person who is not a physical therapist who knows what an OCS is. Or you can go to every family physician in our area, there's about 500 of them, and I want you to find one who, without your prompting, knows what an OCS is and what it signifies. And he said, well, that's easy. Every doctor knows that. I'm still waiting for his phone call, and it's been about 8 years. So he wasn't able to find one other physician or one person in the general public who wasn't a physical therapist who knew what an OCS was. Realize an OCS is for other physical therapists and signifying a certain level, a certified level of achievement and knowledge. It is not for general public. It is not for your referral sources. So many times when I'm critiquing marketing materials that somebody's sending out, they'll have in all their certifications. Very, very rarely, it's like that's like going to China and speaking Egyptian. You're not going to attract anybody. If you go to China and you speak Chinese or one of the dialects in China, you're much more likely to attract people. It's the same exact thing here. When we're talking with physicians, we want to be very sensitive to how physicians speak, and we want to use physician speak. When we're talking with patients, we want to be very sensitive to how patient culture is, and we want to use words that patients use. What I believe the statistic is on the New York Times is written in one of the highest fluency levels in the country in terms of a publication. I believe it's 5th grade, on a 5th grade reading level. So many times when I'm reading PT marketing materials, again, it goes back to the message of yesterday, which is bait for the wrong person. It's bait for the fisherman and not the fish. It's it's words that are meant to attract other PTs and not attract patients. So if we're talking with patients, there's no use of stenosis, or there's no use of spondylolisthesis, or these big complicated terms. It's something along the lines of back pain. And here's a quick quiz that we'll end on today, and I'll give you the answer tomorrow. So I want you to make a list, and number 1 is low back pain. Number 2 is capital L, capital B, capital P. Number 3 is lower back pain. Number 4 is L/S space S/S. So we know and recognize that as the abbreviation for lumbar spine sprain strain. And number 5 is lumbago or lumbago, depending on where you're at. So what I want you to do for tomorrow is write down that list of 5, and then tell me for tomorrow, and you can post it on the page here, on the Facebook page, who says which target market speaks that language. So who says low back pain? Who says lower back pain? Who says LBP? Who says lumbar spine sprain strain in that certain abbreviation? And who says lumbago? I've done my own research on that, and I'll share it with you tomorrow. See you tomorrow.